thank you all for coming today, a lot of people. I'm going to present on the Centennial Arctic Expeditions and the Exploration Club. So I've already been introduced. I'm Jean-Luc, I'm the lead historian on this project. And first, I'm going to lead us through these items here and kind of through the early history of the club. And then we're going to go into the Centennial Expeditions 100-year celebration of the club and our future plans with it and how any of you can get involved if you want. So it all started in 1921. When they did the first expedition. It was a group of ornithologists and they wanted to go to Svalbard and kind of explore what is going on there and collect a lot of bird samples. And this first expedition, it was very successful. They published over 30 papers from being there for 3 weeks on birds. But a lot of people were a bit unhappy about the exploration character of it. It wasn't enough adventure for them. And therefore they wanted to do this again in 1923, but now with a focus on only adventures and not as much on science. And for these people who doesn't know what Svalbard is, it's this little island up there, north of Norway, very close to the North Pole. And so in 1923 they go again, and they this time focus more on the exploration and on the adventurous spirit. And we have the first two items here, which is on one hand a bulletin from 1972, where we've got these amazing maps of how exactly which routes they took and kind of summarizing the early years of the club. And then we've got also the second book here, just a few photos and some of the papers they published. And also they, well, as you can say, they sailed around quite a lot. And in this day here, they were very surprised about what kind of stones they still could find there and the geology of what was going on. And so we've also got on the third thing here, a map where this expedition and the next expedition, 1924, they kind of map all the geological features of of Northeastland and of this northern part of Svalbard. It's a very pretty map to look at. So this first expedition the second expedition was more formative for the explorers in the sense of like what they want to do and how to do explorations. And so then 1 year later, in 1924, they returned and it was on a completely different scale. So we have 25 people going now, 2 boats, they even brought a seaplane along. Mind you, it's 1924. I mean, planes have been, the first Atlantic crossing was like 5 years ago or something. And they start flying around, taking photos of the bay areas, of the ice sheets. We'll see one of them later on. And they also achieved the first crossing from east to west of Northeastland via sledge party. This is like this middle red route which we can see. And also have 2 more sledge parties exploring the northern ice sheet. And if anyone is interested in looking at like old footage of things, there's 3.5 hours of video footage from this expedition. And it's, I mean, if you just take a look at it and skip through, it's really amazing stuff seeing these people work on the island there for 2 months. So these were the first 3 expeditions, and then it kind of dies down a bit around the club until 1927, when they all come together and they found the club. So Elton, he was on all the previous Svalbard expeditions, and then we've got Nicholson and Trapnell, 2 new people. They found this club in 1927. And they have the focus of being an Arctic exploration club, is like their main thing, but in the beginning only men are allowed. And at some point, Oxford University Women's Club is being founded. However, the problem is we have no idea about the university's women's club. There's no known archives for us. We only know that Henrietta Hutton, an ornithologist, she was a founding member, and that is basically it. So if anyone is interested in a research project about studying something basically unknown currently, the Oxford University Women's Club is definitely something there. So what we know is in 1965, both of these clubs unite, and men and women become an equal in the Exploration Club, and from there it goes on. Nicholson and Trapnell, the founders in 1927, they go on an expedition in 1928 to Greenland. And we have 2 more items here, which are the field notebooks from Nicholson. So these are like 100-year-old books where Nicholson wrote down all the birds and he saw and all the things they collected. But these are the only 2, I think, items in the archives which actually went on an expedition and came back. So they went to Gotland, which is now the capital of Greenland. And I thought I'd just add this photo here in the bottom. I thought it was quite funny. And described as mosquitoes and flies on Major Hingston. And if you can see, there's basically just mosquitoes and flies and no Major Hingston left. So if you ever go to Greenland, better bring some mosquito protection, because it was already that bad 100 years ago. And the last items we have here are from the 1935 expedition. And this was the biggest expedition, I think, for the club in general. And they went there for 14 months. They arrived in August and stayed until the end of the next August. And mind you, this is over all of winter. And this time they focus much more on the physical sciences. So they focus on atmospheric studies and glaciology, and also wireless communication and radio waves. We can see here their base they built up with all these antennas. And also, I mean, the thing I want to point out, they have a base in the middle here on the ice cap. So this is literally just on the ice, where they also stay for, well, 12 months. And I was just amazed by this. So here on the right, we've got the schematics of they kind of built this underground base in the ice sheet, like digging through the ice and building this whole thing. And on the left here, we can see a tunnel in the base, and in the middle one, with one of the exploration members standing on this underground lake down here, which gave them fresh water. And apparently also one of them went for a swim in there once because they wanted to explore how far this lake goes underneath the ice. I think in general this expedition was a bit wild. Well, so the wildest thing is they didn't bring a medic because they had a doctor, but the doctor fell ill about like a month before the expedition, and so they had the conclusion that if you don't have an excellent doctor, you can also just bring no doctor at all. Because if something would happen, it would probably be very bad, so no need to bring a doctor if he's not excellent. So they went for 14 months without any doctors. It was fine in the end. They only complained about pain in their tooth, but apart from that, it seemed to work out. And yeah, so also over there we've got, I thought this was very interesting. So they measured the Franklin Glacier. Here we're comparing 3 expeditions now. There was a Russo-Prussian one in 1901, and then in 1924 we had the one where they flew the seaplane. So this picture here is taken from the plane. In 1936 they came back again. And already back then they observed that the ice on the glacier is massively retreating. So here we have the line of 1901, 1924, and 1936. And they already observed that this glacial outflow here is very characteristic of how healthy the glacier upstream is, and already observed that even in these 30 years back then, I guess in some sense the glaciers are retreating and vanishing. Yeah. And also at the very end of the table we've got kind of like their biggest achievement, or like their big achievement, which was mapping the northern coast of northeastland. So the southern one, the western one had been mapped, and they undertook also mapping the northern one. So those are kind of the items here. And now, 100 years later, we want to celebrate this 100 years of the Exploration Club and the expeditions. And for this, we have these centennial expeditions. It's kind of a 3-step process. This year we have like foundations expedition, learning how to work in polar regions and preparing for this. And then next year in 2026, we're going to have 3 expeditions going off, one to Greenland, one to Norway, and one to Iceland. The Arctic countries kind of which were like in the interest of the beginnings. Starting off with the science, and then in 2027, celebrating the 100 years of the club, and also retracing bits of the earlier expeditions from a history point of view. So, what are our further plans, our future plans? Me as a historian and the historical team, we will continue informing the expeditions about where they went 100 years ago and how we can do the same thing. Continue to review the archives, and also the end goal would be to publish kind of 100 years of Oxford exploration. Here we've got the Bulletin, which was published after 50 years, and we would kind of do the same thing after 100 years to celebrate this. And the Centennial Expedition in general, of course, funding is always a big problem, so this is kind of our main focus currently, to get funding for these expeditions and to prepare for this. And if you want to get involved or talk to any one of us, talk to me or Sofia or Carla after the presentation. Thank you all for listening.